Hey guys, you're watching Let's Talk About Prepping. I'm Tyler, your host, and this video is episode 2 of our review of the book Meditations on Violence, a comparison of martial arts training and real-world violence by Sergeant Rory Miller. In episode 1, we read the advanced praise and foreword section to get an idea of what Rory Miller's contemporaries think of his writing and some of the content that we'll see within. If you want to check it out, you sure can, and I'll put a link in the description down below. But in this episode, we'll get into the introduction and the actual meat of the book, written by Rory Miller himself. So if you want a brief introduction as to why I think that this is valuable knowledge for everybody, regardless of their lifestyle or how much they expect to be in any kind of conflict, I'll tell you now. This book is valuable for everybody in the same ways that the game of chess or the art of war by Sun Tzu are valuable to everybody, both businessmen and everyday people, as well as the warriors that they were originally meant to teach tactics to. This is because all of human conflict, whether that's debate, argument, or physical violence, stems from the same issues as any other form of conflict. And by understanding conflict itself, we better prepare ourselves for many facets of life. And as preppers, this is expounded greatly. So it's very valuable to learn the lessons of conflict from people whose professional lives embroil them in conflict every day. And in Roy Miller's case, that largely has to do with physical violence. Now, this book is strongly geared towards martial artists, but by no means do you need to be a martial artist or have any training to reap benefits from this book. And that's why I say that everybody should follow along and even own a copy of this book, because the lessons within will help you in every type of conflict, from arguments to road rage incidents to family violence and external violence. With that being said, I hope you'll stay tuned and follow along with this review of the intro and chapter 1 of Meditations on Violence. Introduction. Metaphors. People are weird. They have an almost infinite ability to learn and communicate. At the same time, this amazing ability is used as much for fantasy and entertainment as it is for information and survival. Take, for example, the rhinoceros and the unicorn. The rhinoceros is a real beast, an animal native to Asia and Africa. It is large, formidable, and familiar to most of us from pictures or visits to the zoo. What do we really know about rhinoceros? Are they grazers or browsers? Do they live in big herds, family groups, or roam the savannah alone? In the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy, we learned that the rhinoceros doesn't like fire and will stamp out a campfire. Is that true? I have no idea. Look at how little we know, and how little we know with confidence about this beast that really exists and is truly dangerous. The unicorn derived from the rhinoceros. Over time and distance and by word of mouth, the reality of the rhinoceros slowly changed into the myth of the unicorn. This process has been so powerful that everyone knows many facts about the unicorn. It has the beard of a goat, cloven hooves, and a single horn. It kills elephants by impaling and is strong enough to hurl the elephant over its head. Yet it can be tamed and captured by a virgin. We know all these facts about the unicorn, but there's only one true fact to know. The unicorn is imaginary. Unicorns are mythical, yet we know so much about them. Rhinoceros is real, and except for a few experts, we know so little. There is a parallel between the unicorn and violence. Just as travelers' tales passing from person to person and place to place and century to century managed to morph the reality of the rhinoceros into the fable of the unicorn, the insular tradition and history of each dojo has morphed a primal understanding of violence into the modern ritual of martial arts. Just as the gray and wrinkled skin of the rhinoceros has become the glossy white coat of the unicorn, the smells and sounds and gut-wrenching fear of close-up personal violence has somehow spawned the beautiful cinema of the action-adventure movie and the crisp precision of the martial arts. In today's world, who are the real experts on violence? The priests of Mars. The minute you don a black belt, the minute you step in front of a class to teach, you are seen as an expert on violence. It doesn't matter if you have absorbed a complete philosophical system with your martial art. It doesn't matter if the art gave you, for the first time, the confidence to view the world as a pacifist. It doesn't matter if you studied as a window to another age and culture. It doesn't matter that you found enlightenment in kata or learned to blend in harmony with the force of your attacker. It doesn't matter because you are about to teach a martial art, an art dedicated to Mars, the god of war, a martial art. Even if somewhere over the years you have lost sight of this, your students have not. You wear a black belt. You are an expert on violence. You kick ass. You are a priest of Mars. The simple truth is that many of these experts, these priests of Mars, have no experience with violence. Very, very few have experienced enough to critically look at what they have been taught and what they are teaching and separate the myth from the reality. The superstar. Do you ever notice that weightlifters don't look like boxers? For that matter, if you watch fencing matches, you see a lot of tall, skinny guys. Judo matches tend to be won by short, stocky judoka, and basically none of them look like bodybuilders. But action stars usually do. Unless they want to appeal to the goth techno market, in which case they are really skinny, pale complected, and wear a lot of black. The idea is the same. Pretty sells. In the media world, everything is about attraction. The fighters look pretty, not the gnarled, scarred up, sometimes toothless fighters that I know. The fights look pretty too. You can actually see the action and even identify specific techniques. They are paced for dramatic content. A movie fight doesn't end when the hero or villain would naturally be lying in a pool of bloody vomit, clutching his abdomen and gurgling. It ends at the moment the director thinks the audience is hyped and not bored yet. Even when they try to be realistic, it's about the spectacle. The very fact that the camera can see what is going on is unrealistic. In smoke and dust and rain and a melee of bodies or the flash of gunfire, the person right in the middle of it can't reliably tell what is going on. And the fighting caters to the audience's idea of fair. It's almost always a close fight to the very end, won by a slim margin. I'll tell you right now that as a public servant who runs a tactical team, if I ever play it fair, if I ever take chances with my men or hostages in order to cater to some half-assed idea of fair play, fire me. Fair doesn't happen in real life, not if the bad guys have anything to say about it, and not if the professional good guys do either. I always wanted to see a movie with Conan talking shit in a bar and looking down to see a knife sticking out of his stomach with no idea how it got there. The story. Maybe this is a metaphor, maybe it is a model. Things are what they are. Violence is what it is. You are you, no more and no less. But humans can't leave simple things alone. One of the ways we complicate things is by telling stories, especially stories about ourselves. This story we tell ourselves is our identity. The essence of every good story is conflict. So our identity, the central character of this story that we tell ourselves, is based largely on how we deal with conflict. If there's been little conflict in the life, the character, our identity, is mostly fictional. I present this as a warning. You are what you are, not what you think you are. Violence is what it is, not necessarily what you have been told. This book is about violence, especially about the difference between violence as it exists in the wild and violence as it is taught in martial arts classes and absorbed through our culture. Couple things first. Preface: the truth about me. I get paid, and paid well, to go into a situation, usually alone, and usually outnumbered by 60 or more criminals, and maintain order. I prevent them from preying on each other or attacking officers. That's the job. Now, since I don't fight every day or even every week anymore, I'm a sergeant now, one step behind the front line. Most of the minutes and hours of the job are pretty easy, far too easy for what they are paying me. But every once in a while, on a really, really ugly night, I more than earn my keep. The fighting happens less, partially from moving up in rank, but even more from the fact that almost every criminal in the area knows me, and I've become better at talking. At C&T training, crisis negotiation team, sometimes called hostage negotiators, Cecil, one of the instructors, recommended reading books on salesmanship. In the intro to one book, the author stated that everyone, every single person in the world, is engaged in selling something, no matter if you were building a car in a factory, performing medicine, or changing oil. I thought, bullshit. I'm a jail guard. I'm not selling jack. Shortly after, there was an extremely stupid and crazy old man who very much wanted to fight 5 times his weight in officers. It took about 20 minutes to talk him into going along with the process. It was then that I realized I am selling something, a product called not getting your ass beat, which is very hard to sell to some people. Here's the resume and bona fides. Feel free to skip it. I enjoy teaching people who have already trained in martial arts how to apply their skills to real conflict. I like teaching officers, people who might need it, the simple practical skills they need to stay alive or the equally simple and practical skills they need to restrain a threat without getting sued, and I like teaching the difference. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in experimental psychology with a minor in biology from Oregon State. I'd planned on a double major, but biochem killed me. While at OSU, I earned varsities in judo and fencing and dabbled in karate, taekwondo, and European weapons. I've studied martial arts since 1981. I've been a corrections officer since 1991. As of this writing, that's 14 years, 12 of them concentrated in maximum security and booking. In 1998, a lot of things happened. I earned my teaching certificate in Sosho Shitsu Ryu Jujitsu. I published 2 articles in national magazines. I was named to the CERT, Corrections Emergency Response Team, and was made the DT and hand-to-hand instructor for the team. I was also promoted to sergeant. By the end of the year, I was designing and teaching classes for the rest of the agency, both corrections and enforcement. I've been the CERT leader since 2002. CERT has been a huge force in my life and career. By 1998, I already had lots of dirt time in booking, something over 200 uses of force, some ugly, PCP and/or outnumbered and/or ambushed and/or weapons, but I'd only had to take care of myself. Suddenly, I was responsible for teaching rookies how to do what I did. I had to really think about what made things work. CERT also allowed me access to huge amounts of training. I'm currently certified with distraction devices, flashbang grenades, a wide variety of less lethal technology, 40mm and 37mm grenade launchers used to fire everything from gas to rubber balls, paintball guns that fire pellets filled with pepper spray, a variety of chemical munitions and shotgun-fired impact devices, pepper spray, and electrical stun devices. I've had the opportunity for specialized high-risk transport (EVOC) emergency vehicle operations course, and have trained with the local U.S. Marshals in close combat handgun skills. More importantly, I've had the opportunity to use some of these tools and learn what was left out of class. There has been other agency training as well. I've done CNT classes, though a CERT leader won't be in that role. Been through the introductory weapons of mass destruction class from FEMA, attended school for the incident command system, been certified as a use of force and confrontational simulation instructor, and recently received a certification as a challenge course facilitator in case anyone wants to walk a high wire and do some team building. When I'm not on swing shift, I'm an advisor for the search and rescue unit. Swing shift or not, I'm a peer counselor for my deputies. I was a medic, NBC defense instructor, and rappel master in the National Guard, studied EMT 1 and 2 a long time ago, bounced in a casino for a couple years, and attended Tom Brown's survival and tracking basic course. And I grew up in the eastern Oregon desert without electricity or running water. That's just a list. Here's the truth. Violence is bigger than me. There's more out there and more kinds of violence than I'll ever see, and certainly more than I could survive. I've never been a victim of domestic violence, and I've never been taken hostage, but in this book I will presume to give advice on those 2 subjects. I've never been in an active war zone or a firefight, never been bombed, nuked, or gassed, except by trainers. Violence is a bigger subject than any person will ever understand completely or deeply. I've put as much personal experience into this as I can, along with advice from people I know and trust to be experienced. I've also quoted or paraphrased researchers, many of whom have never bled or spilled blood in either fear or anger, when the research sounded right. In the end, this is only a book. My goal in writing it is to give my insights to you through the written word. It will be hard to write because survival is very much a matter of guts and feelings and smells and sounds and very, very little a subject of words. Take my advice for what it is worth. Use what you can use, discard anything that doesn't make sense. You don't know me. You've never seen me. For all the facts you have, I might be a 400-pound quadriplegic or a 70-year-old retiree with delusions. Take the information in this book and treat it skeptically as hell. Never, ever, ever delegate responsibility for your own safety. Never, ever, ever override your own experience and common sense on the say-so of some self-appointed expert. Never, ever, ever ignore what your eyes see because it isn't what you imagined, and strive to always know the difference between what your eyes are seeing and what your brain is adding. The format of this book. This book is divided into chapters. The first section, the introduction, gives a brief overview of what the book is about, who I am, and why I wrote it. You've already either read it or skipped it. Fair enough. Chapter 1, The Matrix, is an attempt to clear up the language of violence. It addresses the many types of violence, especially how different they can be, and how the lessons from one type do not apply to the needs of another. Chapter 2, How to Think, addresses assumptions about violence, about training, and introduces training for strategy and tactics. Chapter 3, Violence, describes the dynamics of violence. It is focused on criminal violence, how it happens and what it is like. It will also cover the effects of adrenaline and stress hormones that accompany a sudden attack and how to deal with them. Chapter 4, Predators, is about criminals, who they are, how they think and act, what you can expect from them, and what knowledge is not important in a moment of crisis. Chapter 5, Training, will give advice and drills to help adapt your training to the realities of violence. Chapter 6, Making Physical Defense Work, is about physical response to violence, not about effective technique, but about what makes a technique effective. Chapter 7, After, discusses the after effects of violence, what to expect, and how to deal with the psychological effects of either surviving a sudden assault or long-term exposure to a violent environment. So I hope it seems to you guys like it seemed to me when I first read the foreword and introduction to this book, that this is shaping up to be a really good, reasonable, and experienced source of information on a topic which many of us really do have only a second or third-hand experience of. Chapter 1, The Matrix. You all know the story of the blind men and the elephant, right? It was originally published in a poem by John Guthrie Sachs that was about the silliness of humans disputing the nature of gods and religions. The blind men, each very famous for wisdom and intelligence, walk up to an elephant, touch a piece, and begin to explain and describe the entire animal. The first touches the elephant's side and describes that an elephant is just like a wall. The second, happening to grab hold of a tusk, knows that an elephant is just like a spear. Okay, dull and curved and too thick, but otherwise exactly like a spear. I don't think this was the smartest of the blind men. From a short experience with the trunk, the third decides that an elephant is just like a snake. I don't need to go on, do I? Not to hit you over the head with animal metaphors, but violence is a big animal, and many people who have seen only a part of it are more than willing to sell you their expertise. Does someone who has been in a few bar brawls really know any more about violence than the guy who grabbed the elephant's ear knows about elephants? Bar brawling experience is real, and it is exactly what it is, but it won't help you or even provide much insight into military operations or rape survival. A truly devious mind that understands the principles can occasionally generalize from one type of conflict, say flying a combat mission, to very different types of conflict, such as crime prevention, debate, or tactical assault. But that skill is both rare and limited. No matter how good you are at generalizing, there's a point where it doesn't work and you descend into philosophy at the cost of survival. Many martial arts, martial artists, and even people who fight for real on a regular basis have also only seen a very small part of this very big thing. Often, the best know one aspect very well, but that is only one aspect. Some of the experts who are willing to sell you their insights have never seen a real elephant. Many people, almost all men in my experience, are willing to talk at length on the subjects of fighting and violence. They will lecture, expound, and debate. Know this. Watching every martial arts movie ever filmed gives you as much understanding of fighting as a child watching Dumbo learned about elephants. Learning a martial art often teaches you as much as a taxidermist would know about elephants. Watching boxing or the UFC teaches as much as a trip to the zoo or the circus. Really studying the best research available gives you an incredible amount of knowledge about violence or about elephants, but there's always one detail missing. When you are standing next to an elephant, it is huge. It could crush you at will or tear you in half, and there is nothing you could do. The advantage of being blind, of only knowing part of this beast, is the comfortable illusion of safety. Section 1.1, The Tactical Matrix, an example. Violence isn't just a big animal, it is complicated as hell. If you ever really wanted to get a handle on just one piece, interpersonal violence, You would need to understand physics, anatomy and physiology, athletics, criminal law, group dynamics, criminal dynamics, evolutionary psychology, biology and evolutionary biology, endocrinology, strategy, and even moral philosophy. In this great big complex mess, if you want to survive, you need a quick and simple answer. That's hard. A matrix is used to describe and analyze a multidimensional event in a multidimensional way. Ask a martial artist, what's your favorite attack, or what's your favorite combination, and they will have an answer. For a few years, mine was a back fist side kick combination. Remember that, it will come up in a few paragraphs. There are many ways to break things up. Consider this as one example. There are 4 different ways that a fight can arise. 1. You are completely surprised, hit before you are aware that a conflict has arisen. 2. You felt something was going on, but you weren't sure what. 3. You knew it was coming and you were ready, a mutual combat. Or 4. You ambushed the other guy, initiating action when he was completely surprised. There are also 3 different levels of force that you can use. A. You must not injure the other person. Example, getting the car keys from drunken Uncle Bob. B. It's okay to injure but not to kill. And C. Killing is both legally justified and prudent. This makes a 3x4 matrix of 12 options. In only one of these 12 possible scenarios is the back fist side kick a really good option. It is workable in perhaps 2 more, but for 75% of the options, my favorite technique is worthless. You can plug almost any technique, tactic, or even system into the matrix and see where it applies. Karate's core strategy is to do damage, close in, and hit hard. Given that it is difficult, not impossible, to kill with a bare hand, where does karate fit on the matrix? Where does boxing fit? Sword and shield. Where does a handgun fit? Can you use a handgun when you are completely surprised? Looking at it like that, however, is a fundamental flaw in thinking. To work from technique to situation is backwards. The parameters, in this case, level of surprise and acceptable damage, dictate the matrix. Each box in the matrix represents a type of situation. To go through life being very skilled at 1 or 2 aspects of the matrix and hoping the violence you run into will happen to match your boxes is dangerous, and yet very common. Here's a rule for life. You don't get to pick what kind of bad things happen to you. You may prepare all your life to take on a cannibalistic knife-wielding sociopath. You may get stuck with a soccer riot, or a road rage incident with a semi, or a pickup full of baseball bat-swinging drunks, or nothing at all. You don't get to choose. The purpose of the tactical matrix is to introduce regular people to the idea that violence is complex. For martial artists, it is important to understand that preparing for one thing is not preparing for all things. For citizens watching the news, trying to figure out if what an officer did was the right thing, it's important to understand that not everything can be solved with a wristlock or a few kind words. Violence is complex. The tactical matrix here is not an answer or a guide. It is an example. It's not even an example of types of fights. It is a first step in demonstrating complexity. The matrix can be extended infinitely. Multiple bad guys? 3 ways that can break down. My side outnumbers you, your side outnumbers me, or we're even. The matrix now has 36 boxes. Weapons? I have a weapon, you have a weapon, we both do, or neither of us do. 4 options, and the matrix jumps to 144 boxes. Got it? Good, because now we're going to get complicated. Section 1-2, the strategic matrix. What martial arts tries to be. A New York Times article dated June 7, 2005 describes a video of an officer in a traffic stop taking fire from the driver and his partner running away. The officer who ran away chose the perfect option for self-defense. It was not the best option for his partner. It was not what he was trained and expected to do. He was trained and expected to engage the threat. Officers on patrol avoid hand-to-hand encounters. Fights are dangerous. Even when you win, there's a possibility of injury, exposure to bloodborne pathogens such as HIV or hepatitis, or a lawsuit. Within that context, there are 2 distinctive hand-to-hand skills that an officer needs. In the ugly surprise situation, taking damage and unprepared, the officer needs brutal close-quarters survival skills. Putting handcuffs on an unruly drunk who doesn't want to go to jail but doesn't really want to hurt you requires different skills, different techniques, and a different mindset. Sometimes there are more.
A SWAT sniper needs a crystal clear thought process and the ability to deal with hours of boredom and discomfort. The point man on an entry team doesn't need or use the same techniques or mindset as the sniper, isn't interested in semi compliant handcuffing, and damn well better not be surprised if he works for me. He is the surpriser. In just one profession, four different skill sets for dealing with physical conflict. Not one of them is like dueling, sparring, or waging a war. Martial arts try to do more than that. Some studios promise self-defense skills and tournament trophies, discipline and self-discovery, fitness and confidence, and even spiritual growth and enlightenment. How well do these goals really mesh? Cardiovascular fitness is extremely important for health and longevity and should be the cornerstone of any fitness regimen, yet fighting for your life is profoundly anaerobic. Whether you had a good breakfast will have a greater effect on your endurance 30 seconds into the fight, and 30 seconds is a long time in an ambush, than your ability to run a marathon. Spiritual growth, the measure of many modern martial arts, is a difficult concept to pin down. I once asked my sensei in jujitsu if there was a spiritual discipline associated with Shoshu Shitsu Ryu. David said, "Oh, sure, the dead guy doesn't get to go to church. Don't try to read too much into this, Rory. It's not a way of life. It's a collection of skills a samurai might need if he wanted to go home to his family." Martial arts and martial artists often try to do it all. They teach self-defense and sparring and street fighting and fitness and personal development as if they were the same thing. They aren't even related. Very, very different things get lumped under the general heading of violence. Two boxers in a contest of strategy, strength, skill, and will. A drunken husband beating his wife. Two high schoolers punching it out in the parking lot. A mental health professional trying to hold down a schizophrenic so that a sedative can be administered. An officer walking into a robbery in progress finds himself in a shootout. Soldiers entering a building in hostile territory. A rapist pushing in the partially open door of an apartment. An entry team preparing to serve a search warrant on a drug house with armed suspects. A Victorian era duel with small swords. Because they involve people in conflict and people get hurt, we lump them together as violence, but they aren't the same, and the skills and mindset from one situation don't carry over automatically to the other. Self defense is clearly my focus in this book. What is it? It is recovery from stupidity or bad luck, from finding yourself in a position you would have given almost anything to prevent. It is difficult to train for because of the surprise element, and because you may be injured before you are aware of the conflict. The critical element is to overcome the shock and surprise so that you can act, to beat the freeze. Self defense is about recovery. The ideal is to prevent the situation. The optimal mindset is often a conditioned response that requires no thought, for the first half second of the attack, or a focused rage. The duel is out of fashion in our day and age. It was, and occasionally is, a glorified monkey dance, see section 3.1, forced by society. It was a contest to see who could better uphold the standards of the day, thus it was fought over insults and unacceptable behavior and not more material injury. It was possibly more about show than survival. There was a right way to win. This still happens in rare incidents of doju arashi, where martial artists go to other martial arts schools to challenge the instructors. The early UFC bouts also tried to take on this element in the style versus style, but they were very different.
Can we use the skills, mindset, and strategies of the duel in a self defense situation? Sport is a contest between two people, different than the duel because it is something the practitioners seek and not something they feel they must do to preserve their place in society. It is admirable to me because the real goal is to test yourself. For most, it's not about domination, but about what they have, what they can do, what they've learned. Mixed martial arts, MMA, is part of a long evolution of taking this concept as far as it can go safely. Is the righteous rage, which has gotten so many people through an attempted rape, an efficient emotional response for a high school wrestling match? By combat, I specifically mean war.
Combat is a very different experience for generals than for soldiers. Generals can look at percentage killed, take risks, sacrifice, and maneuver men. For the generals, there are acceptable losses, and you can continue to fight if you suffer 20% killed. For the soldier, it is binary. You are alive or you are dead. Generals win wars. Teams win wars. I remember my drill sergeant yelling, "You are not an individual. You are a part of this team." In order for the generals to win, the soldiers must be predictable. The general has to be certain that if he orders them to march or attack or hold position, they will. Thus, obedience is critical, and it is enforced by a culture that will do what is expected because they don't want to let the rest of the team down. Given that the most common lead up to an attack on a woman is to show a weapon and order her to obey, is being trained to obey, whether in the military or one of the militaristic dojos, a good training method for self defense? Assault isn't just for criminals. Elite military teams, hostage rescue, SWAT, and entry teams use this mindset as much as criminals do. They don't want to be tested or find out what their limitations are, they want to get the job done and go home. The mindset is implacable and predatory. They use surprise, superior numbers, and superior weapons, every cheat they can, and they practice. On the rare occasions when my team made a fast entry and someone actually fought, the only emotion that I registered was that I was offended that they resisted, and we rolled right over the threats like a force of nature. If you can truly flip the switch from surprised, overwhelmed, and terrified to the assault mindset, I can't teach you much. This is the opposite of the frozen response often triggered by a sudden assault, and we train hard to trigger that freeze in others. Spiritual growth is very difficult to define. If it is a depth of understanding of the human condition, you will grow more by living and serving and talking to people than you will ever learn in a class of any kind. If it is understanding of yourself, you will learn the most by challenging your fears and dislikes, and few people stick with a class that they fear or dislike. If it is a happy feeling that all is right with the world and there's a plan and everything is wonderful and good, you can get it from heroin cheaper and faster. If it is something great and magical that will open up your psychic powers, keep playing video games. There is a danger here that I don't properly address in this simple matrix and is beyond the scope of this book. People want to believe in magic and secrets, and there are other people who will satisfy those beliefs for money or power. This can result in abuse or trauma, the very opposite of self-defense. Fitness is objectively the most important effect of martial arts training. The physical skills and self-defense aspects of training will never save as many people from violence as the conditioning will save from early heart attacks. If you study judo, jiu-jitsu, or aikido, you will probably never use the skills to throw an attacker, but I can almost guarantee that you will and have used the break falls to prevent injury. Properly trained, many martial arts give balanced development of muscle, strength and aerobic training, increases in flexibility and agility, and all at a relatively low risk of injury. It may not be as efficient as a good circuit program in these areas, but it can be more fun and you will stick with the exercise program that you enjoy. Fitness will never hurt you in a self-defense situation. Even aerobic conditioning, which rarely activates in a fight, will help to dissipate the stress hormones that will affect your mind and body. When comparing fitness with self-defense, the problems come from the other direction. Self-defense is largely about dealing with surprise and fear and pain, none of which is useful in developing fitness. One example from the other dimension of the matrix to hammer home the point: look at the optimum mindset for each of the examples of conflict. The implacable predatory mindset of the assault is powerful. It is cold-blooded, calculating, and utterly controlled. It is also inhuman, reducing the target of the assault from human to either a resource in the criminal mind or a threat in the mind of an entry team. This mindset, in my experience, horrifies the people seeking spiritual growth. It is a natural mindset and beautiful in its place, but it is scary to someone who is seeking light and love and harmony. People who imagine the harmony of nature are often willfully blind to the savagery between wolf and rabbit. The assault mindset can revel in that savagery. The assault mindset in a sporting competition is completely unacceptable. From the assault mindset, if you are scheduled to fight a world champion heavyweight boxer on Thursday, you shoot him on Tuesday. It is not just beyond cheating. Cheating has no meaning in the mind of a predator. There are only odds, tactics, and meat. This comparison is doubly true for the duel. Some elite elements in combat develop the predator mindset. It requires trust and respect to get an entire team into that mindset. Far more teams fake it by hard training under a good leader than actually have the mindset. True predators are unpredictable, and that makes the chain of command uncomfortable. They will get the job done, but will ignore any parameter or rule of engagement set by command that does not seem important to them. Because of this, they are idolized in times of serious conflict and marginalized, ignored, or pushed aside when combat is rare. Fitness training is about yourself. There is no prey, and therefore nothing for the predator mindset to focus on. A predator without prey is a fat, lazy cat that likes to play and eat and sleep. The predator mindset is a choice. No one is in that mind at all times. It has too many blind spots to function in normal society. Self-defense is never a choice. The attacker is in the predator mindset, not the victim. The victim will have to deal with shock and total surprise. The predator won't. The essence of self-defense is breaking out of the frozen mindset you have been shocked into. If you can access the predator mindset a few seconds into the attack, you can turn the attack into something else. That's powerful, but takes great experience. This matrix could be extended almost infinitely in either dimension. Fight choreography for films, stunt work, performing arts, and restraining mental patients without injuring them could all be added across the top. Timing differences, best class of techniques, ideal opponent, and reliance on technology could all have a space. Despite the wide variety of skills and complete incompatibility of the mindsets or strategy, martial artists are often convinced that they are training for all of these things simultaneously. In strictly regimented classes where things are done by rote and without question, you can see the military roots of a soldier's art. But that obedient mindset can set students up for failure if they are victimized by an authority figure or overwhelmed by an attacker who uses verbal commands with his assault. Some instructors extol the virtues of the predatory mindset, the eyes of a tiger, without teaching how to get there from a moment of surprise, pain, and fear for self-defense, or dealing with the logical consequences for sport. A true predator cheats in profound ways. Not the little ways like illegal nerve gouges in the grapple, but big ways like getting a bunch of friends and weapons and finishing the fight in the locker room before the match starts. This extends beyond martial arts and into the world of conflict and the perception of conflict in general. In the world of movies, boots and fists and guns are used interchangeably. In real life, the skills, needs, and legal justification for striking and shooting are very different. Police solutions to military problems are doomed to fail, just as military solutions to police problems will never be allowed in a free society. You will bring your experience and training, your touch of the elephant, to bear whenever you read about a military operation or see a story about a police shooting in the news. Remember this, that the fair play and good sportsmanship you learned as a child were predicated on two fairly matched people who wanted to be there, not some drugged-up freak with a knife and an officer answering a call. That on TV and in your martial arts classes, they make it look easy to take away a knife. An officer knows that if someone is within 7 yards, he can be stabbed more than once before he can even draw his weapon. That in the movies, the sniper can coolly make headshot after headshot at 500 yards, protecting his team. In real life, snipers have tried in vain to identify a target through smoke and muzzle flash as civilians get slaughtered. That in books, the radios always seem to work, cell phones never go off when you are trying to get into position, and the good guy always carries enough ammo and no one ever just bleeds out and dies from a flesh wound. That when the newspaper decries the brutality of the officer who used force on a 15-year-old mentally ill child, all the officer saw was a 280-pound person in an altered mental state coming at him, swinging a club. And that's the end of chapter 1. As you can tell from just this part of the book, Rory Miller is a very well-credentialed person to talk about the subject of violence, and he approaches it in a very rational and practical way, breaking down the various types of conflict in such a way that a normal person can understand it. I hope that this has been interesting to you, and I hope that you'll stick around for more reviews of this book. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned with Let's Talk About Prepping for this and other types of videos. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.